What's up, Justin from Las Vegas Harley-Davidson, and we are doing the first video in our little video series that we spoke about last time. Now this series is definitely going to be geared towards those that are mainly just getting into riding and getting into Harley, but also for those that have been riding for a long time that are just looking for a little bit of extra information. Today I just want to kind of touch on some brief history of Harley-Davidson and where we've been, where we're going, some of the influential models we've seen, and how we got to where we're at today. So as most people know, Harley-Davidson came out in 1903. Just a couple friends, couple brothers that were building stuff in their shed, kind of taking parts from here and there, trying to build something new and creative. Got a lot of really cool ideas from things they were seeing around, and you know, that time in our history was very industrial and very innovative, coming out with new ideas, and they were definitely on the forefront of that. In early Harley-Davidson history days, we were seeing a lot of hill climbs and flat track racing, and it was really used as more of a utility vehicle to get around because there weren't a whole lot of well-paved roads back then, right? So we saw a lot of off-road motorcycles and new introductions on how we're going to be getting to bikes like this that we see behind me. There's a couple really big features that really kind of kicked Harley off, and we're able to keep them into business so that we can still ride them today. You know, the big ones are going to be the World Wars, both 1 and 2. Harley, along with a couple other companies, were commissioned to build a bunch of bikes for the soldiers then and really use them throughout both of those wars, primarily World War II. And after World War II was when we really started to see Harley-Davidson pick up in their chopper culture and their devoted customer. A lot of guys were coming back saying that their Harley that they rode saved their life. And so they were really just married to that brand. And that's kind of where we started to see that kind of pick up. That really just transitioned into, you know, the time-old tale of Indian and Harley and what's better, who rides this, whatever. I think, you know, it's kind of important to remember that obviously we're all riding bikes. It's cool to be on the road together, but I mean, Harley's the way to go. Talk about some of the first models that were really influential, right? So there was the flatheads that really kind of started the bigger V-twin motors. It was actually the second motor in the V-twin lineup, the motor that we really saw a lot of our GIs use when they were overseas, and they were very serviceable when you're out in the middle of nowhere, and they were very reliable, right? As you know, as reliable standards were back then, a little bit different than what we think today of as reliable. Then the Knucklehead came out, 1936. So the Knucklehead, even though that it was the third in the V-twin lineup, it was really considered the first big twin, right? There was the big twin flathead, but the Knucklehead was really the one that really set things apart. That's the one that we started to see in more touring style of motorcycles. Had a lot of power right off the factory. They looked really cool. It gets the term Knucklehead from the shape of the heads, and people say it looks just like someone's fist. And that was really what kind of set off Harley's long history from there. They're some of the hardest motors to find. They're extremely expensive, even when you can find them completely beat up in a barn somewhere, but they're very cool. And that motor is renowned as one of the motors that really kind of kicked off motorcycling, and where motors are today really kind of came from that. And you see a lot of style characteristics from those motorcycles in bikes that we are coming out with right now. So that's really cool. After that, they came out with the Panhead. Now the Panhead before the twin cam was actually the longest running big twin that they had, and the Panhead was one of those motors that was really a guinea pig for a lot of things. In, you know, the several years that they ran them, they went through countless different styles of oil pumps and lifters and push rods and pistons and all these different things to really kind of gear up for what was coming later in the future. And it was a really good time period for that because things were still relatively new, kind of industrial, and so it really gave them an opportunity to experience with a lot of things. My personal favorite of the old motors is the Panhead. I would love to find one day, throw it in an old chopper frame and build something cool. That might be a little bit later down the line because they're hard to find, much like the Knucklehead, and they're getting rather pricey. So after that, in terms of the big twin, came the Shovelhead, which we still see some of those floating around today. That was a really cool motor. It survived a lot of different things that were going on through our AMF days where, you know, the Harley-Davidson Motor Company was sold for a little bit and then kind of came back. The Shovelhead kind of really kept things kosher through that time period. And we even started to see some Shovelheads in some newer frame models that we still see riding. We saw them in some of the old FXR models, the earlier Dyna models. We were seeing that motor kind of transition into more modern technology, you know, can have higher highway speeds, a lot more reliability on some of the later Shovelhead models. That is one of those that you still see people really getting excited about. There's still a lot of parts available, but it's also kind of following the Knucklehead and the Panhead in terms of rareability, if that's even a real word, but getting harder to find. You see a lot of those when it relates to cool choppers and things like that. So after the shovel head, we have the Evo motor, and short for Evolution. Now this was the first motor that got its name. It wasn't directly reflected off the way that the heads looked, right? So we had the knucklehead we talked about, the pan head. I kind of brazed over, but it looks like just a couple pans upside down on top of the motor. And then the shovel head looked like some shovel heads, like spades. So the Evolution motor was next after that. And the Evolution motor really kicked off a lot of things. That was the motor that we really started to see get put into a lot of bigger bikes. We had our touring bikes that were starting to come out, our FXRTs, our bigger Electroglides, things like that were able to go longer distance. We were starting to see a 5-speed transmission in those bikes, and they were really starting to give a rider the opportunity to get on a bike, go far with reliability, and not, be able to go down the highway without your bike screaming its head off the whole time. Evos are something that we still see all the time. I personally have an Evo. They're in my FXR that I talk about all the time. It was just in the video that we shot with our luggage that just came out. They are something that is still very sought after. They are kind of the first bike that was really used as the everyday Joe. I can get on this bike, be comfortable starting it, letting it warm up in my garage and going. Of course, with the older bikes, like you hear me talk about, mine's always broken, and that is totally true. But they were kind of the first motor that carried a lot more reliability than previous. I mean, vehicles in that time frame in general were, really starting to kind of catch up to what we consider to be reliable today. Still carbureted, still all those things. You had to check your points, you had to check, you can put a different ignition in there, make it run a little bit different. But the Evo was very quintessential for the following motor, which was the twin cam. The twin cam is something that I'm sure all of you have heard about. It's one that we know and love and have seen for a very, very long time. Came out in '99, ran all the way up to 17. And it is the motor that was in everything. Touring, Dynas, Softail, pretty much everything but the Sportster. That is really kind of the center stone for most of us riders. Most of us have spent time on a twin cam, as long as it's something bigger than a Sportster, thousands and thousands of miles. I own a twin cam, it runs fantastic. If you walk through our showroom floor, most of the bikes are still twin cam motors. The Milwaukee 8s came out in 2017 as well, as we were still running the twin cam in some of those different models. But if you see someone down the road, most likely they're going to be on a twin cam. You can get a lot of power out of them. They're very reliable. And as the name states, they were the first Harley-Davidson to have 2 cams in them. Harley-Davidson, we have our 45-degree V-twin pushrod motor. Up until the twin cam, we just had the single cam down low, but this one obviously gave us 2. Now, when we go to the Milwaukee 8, which we'll talk in a second, that went back to 1 for different reasons. But the twin cam is one of those things. If you're able to find a good twin cam, depending on what years you're looking at for different models, you're going to be very happy with it for a very long time. They have 88-inch motors, 96-inch motors, 103s, 110s, 113s, all sorts of different motor options in that you can either buy straight up how it is or build and have something that has a lot of power and is very reliable. So if you have any questions on twin cams, please come see me or the guys in service, and we'll hook you up with some additional knowledge and find you something on the floor if that's the motor that you're looking for, because they're very easy to come by, like I was saying. After that, we have the Milwaukee 8. Those came out in the baggers in 2017 and then moved to everything else, minus the Sportsters in 2018. Very excited about this motor. It is much bigger, it's much smoother, it's much cooler. It has all these different technologies in them to help these bikes run that they should as today's standards. Harley kind of gets a little bit of gruff for being old and old ways of doing things, and the Milwaukee 8 really kicked that up. Whether you're getting the water cooling or the oil cooling, either way, Milwaukee 8 bikes are going to have some sort of twin cooling in them. And not just to help them run cooler, especially in places like here. It's hot in the desert. Those motors we're really, really impressed by. They're the first motors that we've seen, at least through Harley, where you can throw an air cleaner, an exhaust, and a cam in, and you're getting over 100 horsepower. No longer are the days where you have to do big, wicked motor builds to get big numbers out of these bikes. Now you can, right? Harley-Davidson has their 131 kit. Other guys like T-Man have their 128 that are making big, big, big numbers. 140, 150 horsepower is a lot in a bike like this. They are something that we are really looking forward to working with for a long time, and we're very impressed with what they've come out with. If you have any question on that, please come see me, please come see any of the guys. It is very different than things that we've seen before, which we can really break down for you if you want to come on by. But yeah, do a little bit of research on those. They're very, very cool. One thing I really want to talk about is the bike that I have behind me. So this is a 2021, the Iron 1200. The reason I have this one sitting behind me is because, in my opinion, the Harley-Davidson Sportster is probably one of, if not the most influential motorcycle of all time. They came out in 1957. Throughout their course of the time, they have stayed relatively similar. There's only been a handful of changes. They did have a motor change that came out with their really cool iron head, which look cool, ran like crap. they were junk, but they are still really cool. And if you can find one, scoop it, especially if it's running, because it is becoming very collectible and very cool. They jumped to the Evo motor, which we talked about earlier, which was 3 motors ago for the big twins. But they still have them in the Sportsters today. And it's kind of one of those things that if it's not broken, then don't fix it. So since 1957, we've seen a couple electronics upgrades, mounting upgrades. You know, we have the rubber mounted to kind of eliminate all the shaking that we were getting out of the old ones. You know, as to be expected, some technology kind of picks up with it. Really, this is kind of it. It's kind of been the same for a long time. And for most of us, the Sportster is the bike that we've started on. In terms of Harley, right? A lot of kids grow up riding dirt bikes or whatever, but when you're starting to get into Harley space, the Sportster is usually the way to go. Easy on the budget, they're easy to learn how to ride, they're very weight friendly, they're very customizable, probably one of the most customizable bikes out there. If you can think about it, I promise you, someone has some part out there to get it done. They are usually the bike that we kind of push new riders into, not every single time, but more times than not, they end up landing on one of these. Harley's run very cool programs in the past with kind of starting on this bike and helping you transition into a new bike after that we can talk about if you have any questions on that. But these are just very iconic when it comes to motorcycling. The Sportster S is coming out soon, so we are thinking this bike might be kind of getting a facelift pretty soon. So we're very excited about that. It is about time, right? 1957 to today's it's a long time. So we're really excited to see what comes out with that. It is going to have the new Revolution Max motor that's in the Pan Am as well, which we're super stoked on. You know, those kind of bikes are really kind of touching on Harley's history of being so innovative, right? Harley's been around forever, and even though they did get kind of stuck for a while just kind of focusing on the touring bikes, they have been the leader in a lot of different things. So we're very excited to see what these new bikes are coming out with. We will give you guys updates on when that does happen. By all means, if you want to talk to someone in person, come on by. A bunch of cool dudes who like to ride Harleys. We like to talk about them. Obviously, this is a little bit of a long-winded video, so I can go all day. If you want to talk about old bikes, new bikes, whatever, come have a chat, and we'll see you then.